Good day, it's Althea from the Bible in 1 year. Today we spend time in Ezekiel 4 and 5, the theater stage. Have you ever been in a situation where you try to tell someone something, but they do not understand what you are trying to say? After multiple times, in frustration and in desperation, you will say, "Allow me to draw you a picture," to give a more visual, better understanding. Here in Ezekiel, we experience this scenario. God is fed up with Judah, and we start seeing a side of God's character that we do not want to see. For many years, God has been warning Israel through prophets like Amos and Hosea to stop their godless behaviors and to turn back to Him. They ignored these warnings and Israel was carried off to Assyria. Despite warnings, the two sovereign tribes also had fallen into godless behaviors and ignored Isaiah, Micah, Jeremiah, and Habakkuk's prophecies. Ezekiel was among the second group of captives taken to Babylon. Ezekiel's first vision in chapter 1 is of God's throne. Ezekiel was trained to be a priest. Now God calls him in chapter 2 to be a prophet to the exceedingly sinful and hopeless nation. In chapter 3, God prepared Ezekiel for his calling. Appointed as a watchman, Ezekiel was to re-establish hope for the restoration of Israel. This exile was not for punishment, but to reform the people. If he does not speak out and tell them to turn away from their wicked ways, then Ezekiel will be responsible for their blood. God used Ezekiel in chapter 4 and 5 as a live prop, a form of visual prophecy, more visual than verbal. In a symbolic and very dramatic way, he demonstrates the message to them. It is like going to the theater to watch a play. In the first scene, Ezekiel draws a picture of the city of Jerusalem on a brick. He made a model of a military siege against the brick. He builds restriction walls, construct a ramp, set up army camps, and lay battering rams around it. Then he got an iron skillet and placed it upright between himself and the city like an iron wall. Then he faced the model so that it is under siege. This is a visual illustration, a sign to Israel. God is aloof and hostile towards them. He gives them over for destruction. The iron wall indicates that no prayer will come through to God. He doesn't seize them, and He won't hear them. In the second scene, Ezekiel needs to lay down on his left side, towards the north, for 390 days. 1 day for each year of wickedness, to bear symbolically the wickedness and punishment of the house of Israel. Thereafter he needs to lay down on his right side, towards the south, for 40 days. 1 day for each year of wickedness, to bear the wickedness and punishment of the house of Judah. This is to communicate the certainty of exile. They will have to bear the full impact of God's judgment before things could change for the better again. In the third scene, Ezekiel needs to make bread from 6 unusual ingredients. He needs to measure the daily food and water. This is to illustrate that food and water will be cut off during the siege, creating a severe famine. He must cook the bread on dried human excrement. During the siege, all cattle would be killed for food. Therefore, only human excrement will be available. This is to symbolize the pollution impact that the scattering will have on the people. John Trapp says, "Let us be as careful of spiritual uncleanness. Sin is the devil's excrement, the corruption of a dead soul." Ezekiel shares his heart with God about how he never broke the Jewish laws. For this, God allows him to use cow's dung. This is a good example of God's heart for us. He is not mad with Ezekiel, therefore he made an allowance for him. In the 4th scene, Ezekiel cut off his beard and hair with a sharp sword. He divides it in 3 parts. He burns 1/3 off with fire. He finely chopped 1/3 with the sword, and the last third he scatters to the wind. This is to illustrate that in exile 1/3 of people will die of virulent disease or because of the famine. 1/3 will fall by the sword, and 1/3 will scatter in all directions. We can learn from this that God cares and is present even in exile. God will not give up easily on us. Even today, judgment is coming, and we need to repent and turn back to God with all our heart. He will go the full distance before His mercy runs out. We should be aware of spiritual uncleanness. Ezekiel did not waste time in obedience. He did exactly as God asked. Ezekiel shows us that we are to be obedient to God's call on our lives. God works through human messengers. We too can share the heart of God with others and teach them about the sovereign Lord, the gospel, and how we are supposed to serve Him. May you be blessed. Goodbye.